Are we all set to go? Okay. So thank you for joining us on Zoom this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone keeps their microphones on mute because the session is being recorded and we want to reduce the amount of extra noise. Any questions that you have can be submitted through the chat feature and we will be answering them at the end of the session. So to introduce myself, my name is Leland Barclay and I'm from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I'm a senior at Hobart and William Smith, and I've been a double major in psychology and philosophy. After graduation, I will be enrolling in the clinical psychology PsyD program at Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia. So over the past 4 years, I've been a member of the William Smith tennis team, and I've been the team's co-captain for the past 2 years. I've also been a research assistant with Brian Ashdown, who's joining us today, on a study called Parental Acceptance Rejection and Spying on Romantic Partners in the USA. I'm here today with my classmate, Kristen Lay, and my research advisor, Associate Professor of Psychological Science, Brian Ashdown. So Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Lay. I'm a senior at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, and I'm an international student from Vietnam. I am a psychology major with minors in education, French, and sociology, and I'm also completing the Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate. So on campus, I am completing an honors project with Professor Ashdown on interpersonal acceptance and rejection theory, and I am a part of the Asian Student Union and working for the Center for Global Education. And Professor Ashdown, to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about your own background and the recent research you've been working on?
Yeah, so I'm Professor Brian Ashdown in the Department of Psychological Science. I've been here at HWS since 2011 is when I started here. Before that, I was a professor in the psychology department at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks for a few years. And before that, I got my PhD in developmental and cross-cultural psychology at St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. And I grew up in Utah. So I did my undergraduate work at Weber State University in northern Utah. On campus, I teach the cultural psychology classes. There are 4 of them that I teach on a pretty regular basis. Plus, I teach intro psychology once a year or so. I teach statistics every other year. And I also teach human sexuality every 2 or 3 years on campus. My dissertation work and my expertise is in adolescent psychology across cultures and how cultural values impact the way that older adolescents, like 16 to 21-ish year old kids, develop an identity. So I do a lot of work on cultural and social identity. Most of my work is done in Guatemala. So I'm fluent in Spanish, and I travel to Guatemala every summer where I do field work, except for this summer, I won't be going. This is the first time in about 20 years I haven't been able to go down to Guatemala, so it's a little sad. I do study abroad programs whenever I can. So I've done study abroad programs. I've directed them in Argentina and Ecuador and Peru and Guatemala. And if everything goes according to plan, I'll be in Vietnam this fall to do a study abroad program with students. My research, I don't know. The most recent thing I published, I do some human sexuality research. So I just published a paper with a professor that I went to graduate school with. She's now in Kentucky. She and I published work on infidelity and why people choose to cheat on their partners. And I do a lot of research with undergraduate students. So this semester I have 16 or 17 undergraduates who are working with me on 6 different research projects. Some of them just about ready to be submitted. And so all of these students are going to get credit as authors on these published articles when they come out. So yeah, I think that's good. And then I'll answer questions when you have them.
Sure. So thank you, Brian. I've been one of your research assistants over the past 2 years, and I presented our findings of parental acceptance, rejection, and spying on romantic partners in the USA in February at a conference in Seattle. So you touched on this a little bit, but could you please explain the way student and faculty collaborate on research together and through general advising?
Yeah, so as far as research goes, every member of the Department of Psychological Science, every faculty member works with students in some way or another on their research. Some of us work with more students than others. I probably overdo it a bit with 16 students, but all of the faculty in the department work with students. Usually we ask that students have at least taken statistics before they start working in our research labs. But that kind of depends on the faculty member and depends on the project that you're actually doing. So we all do research with students. We all have our own kind of specialty on the kind of psychological science we do. So most students who are interested in psychology can find a faculty member who is working on something that they might be interested in. Some of us recruit students to work with us, and some of us wait for students to come and talk to us about it. So what I do is every semester I send out an email to all psychology students and say, hey, I'm working on these projects. I need 3 or 4 new research assistants. Fill out this application and then we'll talk about it. Other faculty wait for the student to come and ask them if they can work with them on research. And then when you start at HWS, your first semester, you take a first-year seminar, and the instructor of your first-year seminar is your academic advisor until you declare a major. And then once you declare a major, then you have an academic advisor who's a faculty member in that major. And your advisor will help make sure that you're taking all of the classes you need to finish the major. You'll also have an academic advisor who's in your minor. So you'll have lots of support in both your major and your minor. You meet with them at least once a semester to make sure you're taking the right courses. With general questions about policies and stuff you might have to follow. Your advisors are great connections to finding who you want to do research with. So I have some students who I'm their academic advisor, but they're not really interested in cultural psychology. They want to do like neuroscience or they want to do cognitive science. And so I tell them who they should talk to in the department to do that kind of research. Your advisors become really good writers of letters of recommendation for you. They get to know you pretty well. We do a pretty good job, I think, at HWS of making sure that every student has at least one member of their department who they talk to pretty regularly and get to know pretty well through advising.
Yeah, so as Professor Ashe said, psychological science is a very diverse subject and students come to study it for a variety of reasons. So for me personally, I am interested in cultural and developmental psychology. I like doing research about how different culture values kind of contribute to different understanding of behaviors. So I also presented a finding about interpersonal rejection and acceptance theory in Guatemala in Seattle last February. And my current honors research is also about the same theory, but adapted to the Vietnamese population. And on top of that, I have taken classes such as social psychology and cognitive neuroscience. Professor, can you talk about the curriculum and the options students have to pursue their specific interests within the department?
Yeah, so there are currently 8 full-time faculty members in the Department of Psychological Science. And all of us, each of us has our own kind of specialty. So like I had said earlier, my specialty is cultural psychology. So I teach the 4 cultural psychology classes that we offer. And then we have someone else who does all of the clinical psychology classes. We have someone who does personality psychology, someone who does child psychology, someone who does social psychology, someone who does sensation and perception, someone who does cognitive science, and someone who does behavioral neuroscience. And so each of those people teach at least 4 classes within their specialty, and then we all take turns teaching intro psych and statistics and stuff like that. So we require that majors in the department have to take intro psychology, they have to take statistics and research design, and then they have to take 4 different sophomore level classes that are focused on one of our areas. So like I teach a 200 level class that's called Intro to Cultural Psychology. And then all of the majors have to take at least 2 seminars. So mine is seminar in cultural psychology, where I pick a particular topic and we spend the whole semester talking about that topic. So for example, the next time I teach that class, my topic is going to be parenting and parenting across cultures. And then all students have to take 2 research capstones. So it's a 2-course series that you take 2 courses in the same semester. And it's all about research methods in a particular specialty. And you have to do that 2 different times while you're a psychology major. So the curriculum has been created to make sure that our students get a really good broad introduction to lots of different parts of psychology, but then also are able to kind of focus in when they take those upper level capstones, kind of focus in on the specialties and disciplines in psychology that they're most interested in.
So I mentioned in my intro that I'll be pursuing a doctoral degree in clinical psychology in the fall. And that's an area definitely closely related to my undergraduate degree in psychology. So Brian, could you tell everyone if this is the trend for most students, or are there other things that HWS grads who are psychology students go on and do after graduation?
So I would say we probably send about 25 or 30% of our graduating students to graduate school every year. And they go to graduate programs like you are. They'll go to doctoral programs in psychology or master's programs in psychology, but we also send quite a few of our students into master's programs in social work or family counseling or teaching education. And then we also have a lot of students who go on and will work for a few years before they decide whether or not they're going to go to graduate school. So it's like our department has a pretty good success rate of putting students into the Peace Corps and having student psychology graduates get Fulbrights or Teach for America. And then, you know, lots of students graduate with a psychology degree and end up working in fields that you might not think are directly related to psychology, but connect through things like advertising and marketing and teaching. I'm trying to think of what some of the most recent graduates have gone into outside of that. We've had a few who have opened their own businesses and they have been pretty successful. So I would say about 2/3 of our psychology majors go into something other than a psychology graduate program. But that's the beauty of a psychology degree, is that it can connect to so many different career fields and options that it's pretty flexible.
Kristen?
Yeah. Okay, so this is our last question before we open it up to the audience. Professor, how do you make the case for the value of a liberal arts education and a psychology degree in today's society?
Well, so like I just talked about with psychology, it's flexible and versatile, right? Psychology is a way to get into a lot of different fields: social work, marketing, advertising, politics, teaching, social work. I think I said that already. So psychology itself is a pretty flexible and versatile degree. And then liberal arts, sometimes we tend to think that if you're not getting a degree that prepares you for one very specific thing, you might not be spending your time wisely in college. And I don't think that that's true. And as I pay more attention to what hiring companies and big companies, like even big tech companies like Apple and Google, more and more they are talking about how much they themselves value hiring people with a liberal arts degree, because you come out with a liberal arts degree knowing how to ask questions, knowing how to write, you know how to consider evidence and make evidence-based decisions. You've had to take classes in lots of different things in addition to your major. So liberal arts, research shows that liberal arts graduates are more likely and make the transition easier from one task to another. So hiring managers like liberal arts graduates because they can hire you for a particular project, and then when that's done, they know that you have the skills to be assigned to another project, and you'll be able to pick up the new skills you need easier than maybe someone who's been very narrowly trained in one specific kind of thing. So I mean, those would be the arguments that I make as far as why would you want to study liberal arts. As far as the value of liberal arts in society, you know, we need people who might be a psychologist, but they've taken enough philosophy classes and French classes and sociology classes that they have a broader view of the world and the way that society works, which benefits all of us.
So thank you, Brian. That's our last formal question. But now, if you haven't already done so, please feel free to submit questions through the chat. And I see that we have two so far. The first one is from Kristen McCormick, and it says, I want to major in psych. So what does that look like for a first year?
Well, it looks pretty easy for a first year, actually, because we have a lot of students who end up majoring in psychology who don't start taking psychology courses until they're sophomores. So if you want to be a psychology major or minor, the ideal situation would be that you take Psychology 100 sometime during your first year. And then from there you move into statistics. Usually students don't get into statistics until their second year. But even students who, for whatever reason, can't get into an intro psychology class their first year on campus have plenty of time to still get the degree finished by starting with their psychology courses in their sophomore year, and can focus their first year on meeting the general education requirements that we have.
Yeah, I personally, so I'm a senior and I've actually only taken one psychology class each semester during my senior year because I was so focused on my psychology coursework during my sophomore and junior years. So I've been able to finish up my philosophy major as well because in those middle 2 years, I spent a lot of time with my psychology classes. So the second question is, Brian already touched on this quite a bit, but what career paths can a psychology major at HWS lead to? I'll skip that. How did you know you were sure you wanted to major in psychology, and did you have to choose between two majors? Kristen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I actually knew that I wanted to major in psychology since high school because like I took a couple of just like online classes and I find that it is something that I'm interested in. But I did have to choose between two majors, which is accounting and psychology, which make like yeah, they don't have any connection to one another. But I guess like during my first year when I took intro to psychology and I met with a lot of psychology students and also talked to a lot of my professors that I realized that it is actually what I wanted to do. So because like psychology, it touches on a lot of things. It touches on like the biology of the brain and behaviors and like developmental. So there are a lot of things that could interest you in psychology, I feel. And like Professor Ashdown has said, like you can go to a lot of different career paths with a psychology degree. So I feel like um, as a psychology major, you have a lot of options. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I decided on psychology.
Yeah, similarly to Kristen, I knew going in HWS that I wanted to be a psychology major. But my goal as a first year was to go on to med school. I wanted to be a psychiatrist. But as I took a lot of the hard science and math classes necessary for med school, like bio, chem, calc 2, I realized that I wasn't passionate about those classes. So I decided that getting a doctoral degree in clinical psychology was right for me, and I wanted to focus more on the psychotherapy side more so than medications. Um, but as far as the question, did you have to choose between two majors? No, I didn't. I am a double major. I came into HWS knowing I wanted to major in psychology, but my FSEM, my first year seminar, was taught by a philosophy professor, and through that class, I kind of fell in love with philosophy, and I ended up being a double major because of the influence my FSEM had on me. So we have another question which says, what does being a research assistant at HWS look like? As well as, do AP psychology credits earned in high school transfer to credits at HWS? So I guess I could, oh, you can go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, let me answer this from my perspective, and then the two of you can talk about what it's like from your perspective to be research assistants. So as far as what it looks like being a research assistant in HWS, it all depends on the kind of relationship you work out with the faculty member you're working with. So the way that I manage my research assistants is a bit different than the way that other faculty in my department do it. My research assistants, because it's cultural psych, I don't have an actual lab that they work in. And so a lot of it is, sometimes they'll accompany me when I go to the field and help me collect data. Oftentimes I bring data back and then we work as a group together to analyze the data and work with it that way. And a lot of it's independent. So we meet every other week as a team. Whoever's working on a particular project will work. We meet as a team every other week. They update me on the work that they've accomplished. We solve any problems that might have come up, and then we decide what they're going to work on for the next 2 weeks before the next meeting. You can do it for credit or not. It depends. You can be a research assistant and get full credit, which would count as one class, or you can get half credit, which counts as a half a class, or you can do it without credit for the experience of being in the lab. As far as AP psych credits, as long as you pass the AP test with a 4 or a 5, we will accept that in place of Psych 100 or intro psych. So you can come in and not have to take intro psych, but you still have to take 13 psychology classes to be a major. So if you come in with AP credit, you don't have to take intro psych, but you would still have to take another class on campus so that you take at least 13 while you're on campus. So usually you would take an extra sophomore level class while you were on campus. What about the two of you? What does it look like from a student's perspective being a research assistant?
For me, like being an RA really kind of like helped me realize how much I actually like research. I kind of got to do almost like every step of the research. So like from data input to analyzing to writing manuscripts. So it's kind of like you can do the entire project, but then you have the guidance of your faculty. So they are helping you through every step, and then um, yeah, like for me, that really helps me have hands-on experiences on research and really kind of like help me realize what goes into the research. For example, like writing IRBs is a thing, and writing um, like asking for funding and stuff like that. So I think like that experience alone really solidify my goal to become a researcher.
Yeah, I think that when talking about psychology research at HWS, it's also really important to talk about um, how we're able to attend conferences. So the three of us, we were in Seattle in February for the annual meeting for the Society of Cross-Cultural Research. So I did an oral presentation of my work there, and Kristen did a poster presentation. I also went to the same conference last year in Jacksonville, and I was actually talking to a new member of the psych department in the fall, and I mentioned how I was doing an oral presentation at this conference, and she was like, "Really, Leland? Like, I'm so surprised. Like, it's hard for even grad students to be able to do oral presentations at conferences." So because we have a small school and we have close relationships with our professors, the research opportunities and the ability to go to conferences with funding from the school, we had like, I don't know, was it 5 or 6 of us? We've all received full funding to go to the conference in Seattle, which is really good. So I don't see any more questions on the chat. So if you have any other questions, feel free to do that. But there are a few other questions that I will ask. So one of them is, what are some of the majors and minors that students have paired with psychology? Who wants to answer this?
Well, I can tell you about my advisees, which might not be typical. So some of my advice, because I teach the cultural psychology classes and I'm also a member of the Latin American Studies program, so I teach some of those classes. A lot of my students double major in psychology and Spanish, or they'll major in one and minor in the other. So I double majored in psychology and Spanish when I was an undergraduate. Lots of our students will do, along with psychology, they'll do biology or chemistry, especially if they're focused on medical school or nursing school. They'll do child advocacy or pre-health, things like that, in order to kind of pair. Sociology is also a popular one. So students will do psychology and sociology, or psychology and anthropology together. But really there's no limit or rules or expectations. You can combine majors and minors in any way that you want to on campus.
Actually, 3 out of the 8 philosophy majors at HWS this year, the senior philosophy majors, they're all psych majors. So there sometimes is an overlap between the two. So I have another question that came up from Haley. It says, I'm interested in working with young children in the future, possibly teaching or speech pathology. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, so I'll in a minute I'll let Kristen talk about this a bit because she's connected to the teaching program. But we have we teach in the department every year. We teach child development, so you can take child developmental psychology. We also usually teach adolescent psychology. I teach that usually once every other year or so. And you definitely can do speech pathology. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've sent 2 of my honors students who did an honors project with me, like Kristen is now. 2 of them our speech pathologist. One, this is her first year out of graduate school, and she's now a speech pathologist in a local school district. And another one, this is her last year in getting her master's degree in speech pathology. As far as the mechanics of teaching certificates work here, you can get a teaching certificate. You cannot major in getting a teaching certificate, so you have to pick a major and a minor. And then you take the courses that are part of the teacher education program so that when you graduate, you have your major and minor and you have a teacher certification that you can use once you graduate. I don't know, Kristen, if you want to say more about the teacher education program.
So I am not in the TEP program. I am actually in the TEFL certificate program, so that's a little bit different, but I am an education minor, so I guess I can talk a little bit about this. So for example, if you want to be a teacher in New York State, you can follow the TEP program at HWS, and that gives you like all of the credits and like all of the, you have to take all the classes that are related to education and to the subject that you want to teach, and then they place you into curriculum. So you go around the public schools in Geneva, and then you get to have your practicum. And that's what I know about the TEP.
Right. Yeah.
So can HWS students who are psych majors study abroad?
Absolutely. Kristen studied abroad, right?
Yeah.
Did you study abroad, Leland?
I did 2 short-term programs,
Short-term
but
program.
not for a whole semester.
Okay. Yeah, so HWS has semester-long programs and short-term programs that you can do for credit. You absolutely can study abroad. Like I said, I've done programs as a psychology professor where I have taken many psychology majors with me to Ecuador, Peru, Guatemala, Argentina. Hopefully I'll be taking some to Vietnam in the fall, and then taking another group again to Ecuador and Peru in the spring. So I would say probably 80% of psychology majors do some kind, either a semester long or a short term study abroad. And usually what we do is we'll let you count up to 2 classes that you take abroad as psychology courses to your major or minor on campus. So yeah, we don't only allow them, but we really push and encourage psych majors to study abroad.
Yeah, I studied abroad twice, once in France and another one in South Korea. And it is fascinating to study abroad as a psychology student. I took psychology classes in both countries. In France, I took developmental in cultural context. And they had a very different approach. They were very Freudian, which I find fascinating, but it's especially for me that I am interested in cultural psychology. So being able to like revisit all these concepts that I knew or like am starting to learn in a different culture, it's fun as a psychology student to study abroad.
Yeah.
So Kristen, why did you choose to go to HWS?
The first is how much funding the school gave me, but that is a major reason for me. But other than that, I've always wanted to go to a liberal arts school, and being a student from Vietnam, like the decision to study abroad is a big one for me. And so when I was looking at the school, HWS stood out because one, it is so beautiful with the lake and the boathouse, and like just the open campus and how beautiful upstate New York is. And I always wanted to try the liberal arts education because, like, well, in Vietnam, everything is set in stone for you. Like, when you decide a major during high school, and you kind of have to follow through up until university. But at liberal arts schools, you don't have to do that. Even though I know I wanted to pursue a degree in psychology, but like within the first year, I tried a lot of different things. I tried international relations, I tried acting, and also I did education sociology, and it kind of gave me a lot of different perspective on what I wanted to do. So yeah.
Yeah, and for me, yeah, there's a few different reasons. First, I knew I wanted a liberal arts college, a small school, and things were kind of narrowed down for me because I knew I wanted to be in upstate New York. I love this area, super beautiful, and tennis was also a factor for me. So I was first recruited by the Williamswood tennis coach when I was 15. So I knew pretty early on that this is where I wanted to go. So I would say liberal arts, location, and tennis program were the three main factors for me.
Another thing that I only realized when I started attending HWS is how friendly and how helpful the professors are. Like Professor Ashe down know about this. I would just sit in his office hours for like an hour and ranting about nothing. But like just that kind of relationship really helps me in terms of like understanding what I want to do in the future, how I can improve my study, and kind of just like about anything in general. I've met so many professors, like all of my advisors. I have 5 in total, I think. And that kind of like really shape how I kind of want to express myself as a student, and to future employers and to future schools admission. So I guess like, yeah, the professors are fantastic at HWS.
If you have any final questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, are there any final things either Kristen or Brian want to say?
No, we've covered a lot. Go ahead if you want to ask me specific questions. You can send me an email. It's just my last name, Ashdown, ASHDOWN, @hws.edu. And you can send me any email. I'm pretty good at getting back pretty quickly on email. So if you have specific questions you didn't want to ask in the group, just let me know and I'll get back to you.
Yes, you can also feel free. Oh yeah, I'll put my email in the chat as well if you want to hear from a student perspective.
Yeah, I also put my email in the chat.
So I think that's it. Thank you so much for zooming in today, and good luck with your final college decision. And we hope you choose HWS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.